Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at the Silent Hill F on the proposed minimum requirement, which is the i5-8400 or the Ryzen 5 2600, 16GB of RAM, the GTX 1070 Ti or AMD Radeon RX 5700, 50GB of a drive, and we have a target of playing on minimum requirement should enable to play on performance quality settings in 30 FPS I guess at 720p SSD recommended. It's a little bit confusing, so my guess is you play at 1080p with FSR, TSR, whatever R at performance mode, you'll get actually a 720p and you should be able to have 30 FPS. And the preset of low is actually some medium settings, not actually the lowest. Anyway, welcome to Respawn PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. Starting off with the i5-8400, the GTX 1070 Ti, 16GB of RAM, we are playing at 1080p at low settings, which is actually mostly medium, because you can actually put the settings to lower than what it actually is. And I'm using TSR balance, not performance, to get an average of 34 FPS. So we are a little bit higher in the rendering, being a balance instead of performance. The GPU is pegged at 99%, dropping in the low 80s when you enter a cutscene, and using 6 to 6.5GB of VRAM. CPU-wise, it varies a lot, 35% to up to 80%. So we may encounter a CPU bottleneck here and there, giving us quite a stutter here and there. For the RAM, we are at 9.2 average, and for the frame graph, which I don't know where it went, we should have seen a spike when we change scene or zone as the CPU kicked a higher usage. But other than that, it was quite a smooth play, highly playable actually. That is if you don't mind using some upscaling. Next up, we jump on AMD side, so we have the Ryzen 5 2600, 16GB of RAM, and the RX 5700. Now the RX 5700 and the GTX 1070 Ti, they are directly competitive, beating each other depending on which game you're playing. So this is the perfect GPU comparison for the GTX 1070. And we are again playing at 1080p with FSR instead of TSR at balance, and still at low settings, which is actually more like a medium settings. And the GPU didn't peg at 100%. We were on the mid 80s playing the game using about 5.5GB of VRAM. Give us an average of 48 FPS, with often getting close to 60 FPS beside cutscene, which was always 30 FPS. We get way more performance with the AMD than the Nvidia. For the CPU, the Ryzen 5 2600, which is somehow the competitive of the i5-8400, even though the i5 is only 6-core 6-thread and the Ryzen is a 6-core 12-thread. If this game is only meant to be played on 6-core or less, the 12-thread is meaningless. And it probably is, as this situation, we had the CPU utilization in the mid-50s and often peak in the low 80s, encounter more stutter than with the i5, which look like to be a CPU bottleneck. For the RAM, we're using 12GB of RAM, a bit higher than with the Intel and Nvidia combo. I would consider the gameplay was smooth enough to be playable, again, if you don't mind using upscaling. In the end, for the proposed minimum requirement, the Intel CPU was quite on it, the Nvidia GPU was quite on it, AMD CPU seems to be underpowered, the AMD GPU seems to be overpowered, 16GB of RAM seems to be fine, and if you're okay to play at a 1080p upscale from 720p to get only 30 FPS, then they are on target I guess. But stay tuned, I'm going to test the real minimum requirement without upscaling. Thanks to everyone watching, see you in the next one.